With all the competition on Etsy, it's hard to get seen, period. But what if you could almost hack the system? Get seen by your target audience, make sales, build a mailing list so you could easily let them know what's going on in your shop. And at the same time, build an authentic relationship so that these customers are more likely to come back and become repeat buyers. You can do this. One of my favorite ways to boost my sales inside my Etsy shop and also grow my audience is through in-person events. If you do this carefully, you will very likely see increases in your sales before, during, and after the event. And many times, these sales may be coming from people who are not even attending the event. Today, we're going to go over the selection of your show, your booth setup, and also your signage for the show. Remember that you are going to go home feeling really badly about yourself and also your products if you are somebody who sells hunting supplies and you end up vending at a show that is trying to draw vegans. The first thing you need to know before you ever apply to an event is who your target audience is. This is so not only do you know what products they want to buy, but also because you will know where to find them. You're going to know where they hang out. Is your niche in the fiber arts industry? If so, there are a ton of different fiber festivals that are really wonderful that you are going to want to seek out. Does your target audience love supporting local businesses and also really enjoy cooking with fresh produce? You're probably going to want to go see if you can vend at your local farmers market. You get the idea. Go to where your customer is. If you do this, then vending at a show is going to be like showing up on the first page of your Etsy search results. Your ideal customer is walking right by. All you have to do is coax them in. As a side note, you can absolutely approach local businesses about doing some sort of pop-up in their shop. Say your ideal customer is an avid reader, then go to your local bookstore, get to know the owner. It's quite possible that they are going to fall in love with your items and they're going to say, okay, what are your wholesale prices? Because I want to sell your stuff right here in my shop. It's also possible that they may be a little less sure that their customers will want your product, but if you ask, maybe you can have a pop-up. It's basically a mini in-person event. Maybe you are the only vendor there, maybe there are a couple vendors, but it never hurts to ask. Create your own opportunities. So now that you have selected your event and you have applied, it is time to start planning. And listen, you may not have gotten into your ideal event, and that's okay. Sometimes it can take years to get into the shows that you want to get into. But use this event that you did get into as learning experience so that next time you will get in. Maybe you did get into the event that you wanted to, but your booth is not in the location that you really want. Once again, it's okay. Foot in the door. Often, if you talk to the person who is coordinating the event, you can get on a waiting list so that if there is a vendor cancellation, then maybe you could move into that more desirable location. A lot of the vendors don't ever think to do this, so the waiting list might be quite short. And trust me, there are a lot of cancellations, especially in the climate of the last couple of years. And if there isn't a waiting list, or if you don't get moved for this specific event, when you apply for next year, when you fill out your returning vendor form, ask about moving then. Be proactive. Foot in the door. When I was young, my mother and I would go to a lot of different craft shows. It was basically just a folding table with a tablecloth over the top of it and your stuff kind of just laid out there. There wasn't anything fancy. There were no signs. Today is a completely different story. Each booth is basically a mini storefront these days. The first thing when you think about display is getting a number of people to see your items. So if you have a 10 by 10 booth, which is pretty standard, if you just put a folding table at the front of it, you are wasting your space. Often you can only get about 2 people looking at one of those tables at once. Say they're taking a long time. There may be people who are wandering by who are actually legitimately interested in your items, but they just never actually make it to see your stuff because there are people in the way, they don't want to wait, and they just never make it back. My sales volume went way up at events when I spread things out. Square footage of my actual space, it did not change, but I began to use my space more effectively, and I did this with grid wall. So if you have a booth that is 10 feet by 10 feet, you have 30 feet where you can put grid wall. You can put 10 feet on each side and then on the back, and your stuff is much more spread out and you can get a lot more people in. It's way better than a single folding table at the front. Couple of notes about grid wall. I don't recommend the white. The white chips and it ends up looking just really not good pretty quickly. Even if you're careful with it, it still chips. Also, my grid wall is 5 feet tall, and I'm able to get my 5-foot grid wall into a mid-size SUV. So you don't have to rent a U-Haul, you don't have to have a massive truck to bring your display around to these shows. It's manageable. A booth that you thought looked spacious when there was nobody in it is going to look very different when you have customers in there. You need to think about where you're putting different displays. You also need to think about where you're putting your checkout counter. You don't want your checkout counter to impede people's ability to see your things. If you have a line at your checkout counter, you need to make sure that people can still see your items. So think carefully about this. Imagine it full of people. If you have a bunch of friends, set up your booth and have them come through and see what it really looks like and see where people can get. How many people can get into your booth when it is actually full? So takeaway here is leave more space than you think is necessary. You need to think about people with canes and wheelchairs and strollers. Some people even bring wagons. They pull them along and then as they buy things, they put them in the wagon. So you need to make sure that all of these people can be accommodated. Speaking of wheelchairs, make sure that your booth is accessible. If you do end up having things up a little bit higher on some grid wall, make sure that you're there so you can assist people, get things down so that they can see them. Make sure that all of your customers are seen and that they are able to purchase or at least see the items that they want to see. You don't ever want someone to leave with a sour taste in their mouth. People are going to hang on your display. They're going to lean on your display. They may shake your display. They will do this, I promise you. Every single show, somebody is hanging on my stuff. The last thing you want is for your display to fall down. Someone may end up getting hurt. Your items may end up all over the place. Your stuff may even end up breaking. You don't want this to happen. Make certain that your walls are sturdy. If I am lucky enough to be against a wall and not in the middle of a big open space, then I will bungee cord my display to the wall. But you want to make sure that if you grab it and shake it and lean on it, that it isn't going anywhere. There are ways that you can set up your grid so that it has support, so that it's not going to fall over. Not only from somebody leaning on it, but once you put your items up there, there's weight on one side. Is the weight from your items going to cause your grid to fall over? You need to think about this. It's not as easy as just sticking up all of your grid panel in a line and having it work. That's not going to work. You need to figure this out. And it's not just about your walls. Make sure that your checkout counter is sturdy because people put their purses down, they put a lot of belongings on, they put their elbows on it, and they lean. Think long and hard about your signage. The first thing you want to think about is getting it up really high so that your signs can be seen from far away. You want to be able to pull people in. In my experience, people make one round before they decide on what they're actually going to buy because there's a lot to see. And sometimes people will say, "Oh, I'm absolutely in love with this. Yes, I'm coming back." And they might forget where you were and not be able to make it back to your booth. So if your sign is really high and memorable, then that may make the difference on whether they're able to find you again or not. In general though, you just want to think of your sign kind of like an Etsy banner. Lure people in. You want to create curiosity and desire. If your items are really small and easy to overlook when somebody's passing by your booth, blow them up on your sign. Make them easy to see. If you hand make each of your items like really hand make, this is a great place to showcase that. Maybe you are a potter. Your banner would be a wonderful place to maybe have an up-close image of your hands creating a piece on your wheel. These days, a lot of people say things are handmade when they're not really all that handmade, and people love handmade. They go to these sorts of events so that they can get these one-of-a-kind items. So if your items are like that, then showcase it. This is the perfect place to do it. As I said, I have a lot more to share on this topic. Really, I feel like I'm just getting started. Next time, we're gonna go over money and getting sales before the show has even begun, and just setting yourself up to have a good show to the best of your ability. There's a lot that you can do. Do this right, and these customers that you meet will very likely come back to your Etsy shop, become repeat customers, and start to advertise your Etsy shop through word of mouth, which in my opinion is the best form of advertisement.